Welcome to another episode of Selling What's Possible. I'm Dave Irwin, your host, and this podcast is dedicated to strategic account teams focused on growth and retention. And joining me today is Dan Pfister. He is founder of Winback Labs. And our topic today is going to be about winback and reactivation programs tied to enterprise accounts. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about Winback Labs and what makes you so passionate about this topic and what brought you to create the company.
Well, a number of years ago, I had a company and we had generated a little over 50,000 customers. And in 2016, we had this huge hit of attrition. Churn just spiked. And we couldn't understand why it happened. And it was really putting a real dent in our bottom line. And I was responsible for this area of the business. And so what I did is, I'll give you the super short version of it, is I just took everything like we had always like reached out to our past customers very non-strategically. Like, it was very it was pretty random actually. And that didn't really do much. And one of my partners said, Dan, you got to fix this problem. This is your bailiwick. And I wasn't very optimistic about it because we'd already gone out to these people. And if they were going to come back, a bunch of them would have come back with, that initial outreach. Anyway, I just took everything I knew about marketing. I threw it into a win back program and, um, it was nuts. It was the fastest, easiest revenue we'd ever generated. We had like a 57x ROI right out of the gate. Our sales cycles were just a fraction of what they were with new customers. The costs were crazy low, and I just became enamored with it. So what I did is I did a lot of work optimizing the program, and I started talking to a lot of people to learn all I could about other people's processes for winning back lost customers, and I just learned so much. I started a podcast, um, and then we did a study because I wanted to know, were my experiences and the experiences of the people I was talking to common? Like, is win back really a thing for virtually any business? So I did the study that took about 9 months because a lot of people don't want to talk about win back. I actually talked to a woman who did one of the original win back studies about 20 years ago, and she says it's hard to get people to talk about win back because a lot of them think of it as their secret sauce and they don't want their competitors to know what they're doing. So it took a while to do the study, but we got some good numbers and I can share those with you. And then I wanted to put everything that I've learned into one little package. So I wrote a book called $1 Million Win Back. And that basically is a compilation of everything I've learned.
Well, that's terrific. I mean, what a fascinating sort of experience to have such a tremendous success like that. That's rare that you hear about that kind of level of performance. So I'd love to let's delve in right there from sort of a high level, overview of what are sort of these findings in terms of just statistics and performance metrics as it relates to these programs you put together.
Sure. So what I found was that, for the average smaller enterprise, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million is very common. You see insurance companies getting up into and telcos getting up into the tens of millions with their win backs. And there's two core reasons why win back generates so much revenue. And the first thing is there's a very high return rate. Customers will come back in large numbers if they're approached strategically. Um, uh, my study found that on average 26% return, and there is a study featured in the Harvard Business Review, and it found that even more come back. They found that about 31% on average come back. So so that's the first half of the revenue, right? First, you got to have a lot of people come back. And what's really fascinating is that when people come back, their lifetime value more than doubles. Again, that's what the customer win back benchmark study found, and that study featured in the Harvard Business Review found the same thing. And I've personally won back thousands of lost customers myself, and I found that to hold up also. One of the most fascinating things about WinBack is it's just so low cost. Um, the only good numbers we have are for SMBs, unfortunately, and the average cost for an SMB is $5,000. And and the thing is that it's so inexpensive because your leads are free. They're sitting in your CRM. You don't need to pay for lists or buy ads. You don't need to pay anyone to qualify the leads or educate them on your product or build the relationships, right? All that work has been done. Now you might have to reawaken a relationship, but that's very inexpensive. So, with these low costs and high returns, obviously the ROI is really high. Um, the best numbers we have are for SMBs only because those are the majority of the people who respond to the survey. But it ranges from about 32x to about 180x, and it's all dependent on uh, the cost of the campaign. Basically, like when I do a pure email outreach, the cost is extremely low, and we're up around 180x. And for there was an HR company, and their win back involved wining and dining entire HR teams, and their ROI was closer to 30x. Um, Sales, of course, are a lot faster, right? Because um, so much of the sales work has already been done. You think of everything that goes into a sale. Um, you got to
Right.
source leads, engage them, qualify, build relationships, all that sort of thing. And the sales are also easier, and we can go into this in a lot more detail. But you've got all these big sales advantages, right? You've got insider knowledge. Uh, they're trusted. There's already a level of trust. As a matter of fact, we should probably table this till the end, or till later on when it fits in better.
Yeah.
But there's two other big. I'll just give you one other big thing. The use cases. It basically, you create instant pipeline, right? All you need to do is go into your CRM, create a list of your lost customers, then weed out the ones you don't want back, and in a couple of hours, you got this ready-made qualified list of leads for your pipe. And so that's one thing, creating instant pipeline. Another one is for growing sales when budgets are tight, because it takes much fewer resources to win back a lost customer, and it's much less expensive. Um, and I'll just give you one more. Because sales cycles are so short, if you're trying to hit a quarterly number, um, dipping into win back is a great way of hitting those targets.
That's great. Yeah, I'd love to delve into different aspects of this. It's a fascinating area. In the enterprise category, there's sort of this concept of dormant accounts.
Yeah. When it comes to going dormant, one of the fascinating things that I find is the customers just haven't been approached, or they haven't been given the attention that they need. And that is that's the number one thing for dormancy. Like
Really.
they just are not given the attention. Now, as far as why customers just leave, like so often, they're just lured away by a competitor, or there is a change in leadership, and the new leaders brought in their preferred vendor. And those are, and sometimes companies they just want to change. They think that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and so those are reasons why customers leave on good terms. And of course, there's people leave on bad terms, right? There might be feature gaps, poor onboarding, value hasn't been realized, customer service issue, problem with the product, that sort of thing. But those are the core reasons why people leave or go dormant.
Is it important to organize what those reasons likely are before you begin to put together your win back or reactivation strategies?
Definitely, definitely. Like you said, for the people who realize that they made a mistake and they shouldn't have left you in the first place, um, a lot of them won't come back on their own. So you've got to reach out and make them feel welcome. I think that's a very important part of that. Also, if somebody was lured away by a competitor, and they left on good terms, the key really there is to offer them some kind of a new value. You need to get their attention again, and offering a new value is something that works really well, or giving them something that's improved. But basically, it's about delivering more value, and that's for the people left on good terms. As far as for people who left on bad terms, has to be handled a little differently. You need to reach out with caring and empathy. You got to ask about their experience, take responsibility for any problems, and do your best to fix those problems. And And the reason you want to do that, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to do that, because, but I think that at the core of it is that there's two very powerful psychological responses that happen when you do that. The first one is you kick in the peak end rule, and the peak end rule this is that Nobel laureate economist, Daniel Kahneman, and this is his rule, and the peak end rule basically says that the last touch you have with a person has a disproportionately large impact on how they feel about you. And the last touch you had with your last customer, left some of them so unhappy that they actually stopped doing business with you. And that's how they're going to feel from you, but from now on. But what with winback, you want to create this very positive new last touch, right? And so basically you've taken this whole peak end rule that was working against you, and now you get it working for you. And the other psychological effect is called the Pratt-Fall effect. And the Pratt-Fall effect says that others like you more when you make a mistake and you recover from it. And so when we try to fix a mistake or a problem that caused the customer to leave, they'll actually like us more than a customer who didn't have any issues at all.
You talk about, so the results are pretty remarkable that you get, you know, in terms of just reaching out to dormant or customers that left. Is there something that was established in the first place, this trust? And you talk about approaching them strategically. That is the kernel of sort of effectiveness that creates that ability to win them back so effectively. What's there at the beginning or that initial relationship that helps, you know, make that happen?
Yeah, sales is a trust game, right? People buy from people they trust, and your past customers, bought from you before. That means a level of trust has already been earned. And, that's something you simply don't have with new prospects. And, you also have familiarity working for you with the past customers, which is kind of like a sister to trust, right? People prefer to buy from people that they know. Um,
Yeah, comfort level, a trust, a familiarity. Those are all advantages that have been established, so that when you go back to reestablish or reactivate um, a relationship or accelerate it, if you will, you've got sort of that foundational level in place. And so
yeah,
I agree with you. We have discovered, and there's a lot of focus recently on sort of insight driven selling, understanding customer needs. We focus on pre-intent signals, really an in-depth understanding. There's recent research that talks to and demonstrates that the number one factor that's driving sales wins and losses tends to be the depth of understanding of the need and the fit of the solution to the need. And so I think that there's a tie back to relevancy, relevancy to understanding the need, how relevant you are in that moment of need, and addressing those needs builds trust, and trust builds relationships. And so, we often talk about trying to be highly relevant in the context of what's going on in the customer's world. Can you talk a little bit about your point of view on, understanding the customer? You brought up at the beginning, taking a strategic approach.
yeah. I mean, I just approach this from two areas. So when you go back to a lost customer, you want to expand into a current customer into another area. You've got insider knowledge. Whoever knows the customer best wins, and you know a lot about your lost customers. You've got data on their purchasing behavior, on their usage. You know when the buying window opens. You know who the decision makers are. You know what they're trying to achieve. You know what's important to them. And all of this knowledge is pure gold. It gives you the fodder you need to create relevant messaging and compelling offers. And it gets even better with this whole insider knowledge is that about one third of your past customers will literally tell you what it'll take to win their business back. That comes from research that Jill Griffin and Michael Lowenstein did. And what greases the sales wheels better, than knowing precisely what the customer's looking for. And again, you don't have anything like this with new prospects. So you've got this this inside track. And so that's what you start with. And when you actually reach out to a lost customer, say someone who left, and you're not even really you don't really understand what the terms are that they left on, good or bad, ask them about their experience, where things went wrong, what you could have done better, put the customer at ease. Like, and then when you've got that customer at ease, or the past customer at ease, they're much more opening to letting where's that initial point of friction. um uh, why did you make that final decision to leave? After you left, what happened? Who did you go to? Why did you choose that particular vendor? Did they offer something that we don't offer? You can really, really go deep, um, when you get that, when you get on the call with that lost customer. And what's interesting is that many, many, many people will take that call if it's an informational call.
That's so great. I mean, I think in today's world, we've seen a lot of these prospecting statistics just sort of get decimated. It's executive buyers aren't engaging salespeople really at all. It's turned the attention of of C-level executives at suppliers towards their existing customers, growing customer accounts. I think customer growth and retention is a top objective of CSOs, but it's largely been historically ignored for, with so much focus on the go-to-market motion and prospecting. So when you get into these accounts and activating them and winning them back, expanding them, it's such a I have to call it the invisible pipeline, because there's so much potential there that's just waiting to be tapped in. And I think people don't realize that this core essence of trust and understanding and empathy and relationships, and as you called it, this gold sort of knowledge set, it's taken for granted, but it's not really leveraged as an asset as much as it could be. So you've mastered how to turn that into campaigns, how to actually turn it into a program, a programmatic way to drive growth, not just on an account, but on a whole group of accounts all at once. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit about, just the thought that goes into designing the program. Obviously, some could be simple and some could be more complex and elegant, I would imagine. But I find this fascinating because I don't think, in the enterprise account group, we think about expansion programs like this, where you're actually tapping into marketing and sort of a programmatic way to message and expand that trust field, if you will.
Okay, so I'll take a look at it from the win back perspective, and anyone you want to move into expansion, we can do the corollary for that. So
Okay.
so the first thing I do is I want to identify our best prospects, the ones who bring in the most revenue and have the highest likelihood of returning. So we've created a win back propensity model, and basically all we're doing is we're scoring each lost customer on their probability of returning. And then what we do is we have a predictive revenue model to estimate the revenue potential of each lost customer. And you know, if you wanted to do this yourself, I mean, I've just mentioned that lifetime value doubles, right? So if you've got somebody with a very high first lifetime value, that would be a big part of this predictive revenue model for
Absolutely. Yeah.
how they would do things. And the same thing with the propensity. Just think of standard recency, frequency, and monetary, right? So just using those basic things, you can create your own models. Of course, we've developed them a little further, but the point is, this isn't rocket science. Okay. So what we do is we merge the values from the propensity and the revenue models, and we get this win back value score. So we see the relative value of all of our lost customers. So that's step one, identifying the best prospects. And then the next step is we want to understand them, right? Because the success of a campaign is basically dependent on how well you understand them. And the better you know them, the more you win back. And what we've done is we've created this lost customer journey map, and it's on our website. It's free to see, but basically there's just a whole journey people go from like initial friction to considering another group to uh, looking at alternatives to actually deciding to leave, uh, post experience, what their post leaving experience was, reconsidering other options, all these things, right? So we go through all of this, and we do it in three ways. We do it with internal research. We want to establish a company's history, and you know, we know so much about our past customers, so we do this internal research first on this group. Then we do qualitative research because we want to map the specific stages of their departure journey, exit triggers, potential return pathways, all that sort of thing. And then if you've got a lot of customers, and if you've got like say more than 40 or 50, we also do of ones that you did want to win back. Um, we do quantitative research to determine the relative importance of the reasons why they left and the cofactors around why they left. So first we identify people, then we get a deep understanding of them, um, and then we get win back ready. So you may have found that you've got these three friction points. You can mitigate one, you can fix another one. So you do this work, or maybe they left you for another competitor because they offer a particular value set that you don't offer. So you might want to create that, or plan to create it, so you can tell people like this will be available in 3 months or something like that. So basically, what we do is we create this revenue engine based on this knowledge that we have got from our research, and it's basically an offer, a messaging, and a cadence. So we put all that together. We get we get we get launch ready, and basically what that means is we want to make sure that if they're ready to come back, it's as easy as humanly possible for them, right? Um, uh, if you've got a ton of data on them and you're a SaaS company, you might be able to set them up so they could just start again the next day or a week from now. You want to make the onboarding really, really smooth. So you do all that kind of pre-win back stuff. Then you launch the program, and and after you launch the program, and like say you launch it to, I don't know, say 10 people or 10 groups, you do a win-loss analysis. You find out, you talk to the people who came back and you ask them why. You talk to the people who didn't come back and you ask them why. And then you just, iterate and iterate until you get everybody back. Because
So great.
I know that sounds that might sound a little out there, but oh my God, the number of people who've gotten back all of their clients that I've talked to is nuts. I was talking to a gentleman who had 6 lost accounts that the sales uh, their revenue leader gave them, and he got every one of them back. Now it takes time, right? Because if a customer leaves and they're with somebody else, so much about them, it's important to them. You nurture. You try to maybe get back in on a pilot. When an opportunity arises, maybe to come and do a pilot, so you can come back in to prove yourself up again. But the point is that the number of people you can win back if you're dedicated to it, and if you're a good fit for them, of course, is
A lot
larger
bigger
than
than you think.
is a
Yeah,
lot. It is a lot bigger than you think.
that's really incredible. Well, obviously, it's a test and learn iterative process that has some thought in terms of using data to analyze the right approaches and then apply the right treatments and things like that. I would love to get into how you could apply the same thought to the expansion side. So, what we often see is that, these global enterprise accounts are massive that we support with our customers, and they often own 350 other companies on average. They're global. They span multiple regions of the world. They have different, um, you know, all sorts of business units, buying centers, other companies. And if you think about establishing a foothold in one area, and being able to exploit that to expand into other areas. It seems like there's clearly some of these approaches and techniques that would apply to sort of that expand selling value proposition, which would build off the trust that's sitting, with one group in a parent company and exploiting it to reach out to others.
Well, I think that if you've got one of your contacts is with Department A, I don't know, with sales, customer success, whatever it is, there's going to be another department adjacent to them where you could have some real value, or you could learn about them, or there might be something that the marketing has to do with sales, and you could ask to talk to that person. But the bottom line is this: that contact can tell you who else you could contact just adjacent to them, in a very low risk way, for them. And just that introduction will move you halfway up the stack, because this is a trust. You're getting basically a solid referral.
Exactly. An internal referral.
Yeah, and those internal referrals are gold. They're just gold. I mean, take a you know think about how long it takes to engage somebody on the inside. I mean, it could take, dozens, and it could take forever. It could take, months and
Right.
months and months. And, this puts you, right up the pack. And the other things, you'll have a much better idea of what to say, because you already know a lot about the company. You can say, well, this is what you're doing here in marketing. And for, you know, doing this in sales, you could probably do A, B, and C. Is that something that you think would be worth talking about to this other person? So, that insider knowledge, the trust factor, the relationship, and the relationships are just everything. I mean, it's mainly that relationship, and being able to expand that relationship, use that relationship to get more and more contacts throughout the company. And it's not only important for expanding the sales, but if you have that business and you lose it, you want to have as many points of contact to understand why you lose it. Because just because you lose the business, you talk to one person, they're looking at it from their perspective. You talk to another person, it's their perspective. So you get a much fuller picture if you've got a large footprint in the business.
Are there things about the referral or about the essence of the service or that are attractive to talk about? Are there priorities? So, example, is it the experience the current customer has with you as, just providing good service, or the outputs or the outcomes or the benefits, or what is it in your opinion seems to be the driver of perceived value off of a referral, for
Well,
example?
I think that you have to have a very good relationship with the referrer. You've got to be in very good, you got to be in very good stead with them, because they are risking their relationship capital by referring you. So they've got to be very confident that you are going to make them look good,
Right.
when you're referred. So I think that's the biggest thing. So if you're going to be going after that, that's the time, spend 3 or 4 months or some period of time over servicing them. Um, just making as just being as good as you possibly can be, so that when you do ask for that referral, they're happy to do it, you know, and there's other basic, and if you can actually help that person in other ways, the principle of reciprocity kicks in, and they'll feel more compelled to help you out. So, you know, be a good person, help them out as much as you can, and deliver as much value as you can before making the ask.
Yeah, that's terrific. I think so, there's so many angles on this, but I think the concept of expansion selling in existing accounts, the same principles of winback apply to sort of activating dormant areas, if you will, right?
Hmm.
There's often been some attempt or some previous discussion or interactions with a lot of different areas inside of accounts that there's tribal knowledge there, right? There's experience, there's, capturing that and keeping that tribal knowledge. I think you're advocating is really valuable gold to leverage future, relationship pursuits and expansion and win back and all those things, because it's that inside information and that sort of understanding of buyer behavior inside that account that
Mhm.
really pays dividends.
I mean, you know, talk to this person first because their title might not equate to being above this other person. Their nose will get it out of joint. All these little things, they can, have a huge impact. But the main thing is that the better you understand what they're trying to achieve, what's important to them, next quarter or the quarter after that, and if you can give them some unique insights that can, like, after you do get that initial talk, so that you can really drive it forward and make that tremendous impression. You've got to have something ready for them so that when you do make that contact, you can make a stellar impression. That's really
Exactly. Yes.
important.
Insight driven selling, being able to offer information that they're not aware of with a good level of business acumen and understanding is really sort of the new normal now. And we see if you don't have that, it doesn't work at all. And if you
Right.
do have that, it becomes, obviously table stakes, but it can be a real competitive advantage. And we see a similar reaction. Customers respond very well when you're prepared, empathetic, understanding, doing the appropriate discovery, being thoughtful about it. You've echoed all those things throughout this discussion. So this has been great, Dan. I would love to hear just any final thoughts for our audience, strategic account managers thinking about programmatic expansion and win back. Any other sort of final best practice thoughts, things to think about in 2025 as companies work so hard to really put their foot on the gas and drive growth off of existing customers.
Yeah. Well, I think that your past customers, they're the low hanging fruit in your business. Winning back a lost customer is faster, cheaper, and easier than acquiring a new one, and there's no downside because a win back customer generates more revenue than a new customer. As far as the expanding current sales, you've invested, a ton of time, money, and effort developing that relationship, developing all that trust, gaining all that knowledge. Don't waste that investment and squander those potential expansion sales. Try this for yourself. Do a test. With one group and see how it works. I think it's going to be some of the faster, easier revenue that you'll make.
There's a lot of dormant accounts that can be doing much more revenue, and you can trade off of the trust that you've already built, and don't squander the investment and the capital you already own and have. Turn it into a program for growth is really
Exactly.
the lesson of this. So thanks so much. And Dan, if people want to, watch your podcast or get a hold of you, learn more about your approach, how would they best get in touch?
Either Dan at winbacklabs.com or visit me on LinkedIn. We've got lots of articles, links to the podcast and the book there. So that's the best way to get hold of me.
Terrific. Well, a lot of great lessons learned here. Thanks, Dan, for joining us on this episode of Selling What's Possible. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Appreciate it.